Rate that album.
Rate that album. Okay, sorry.
Fantastic start. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rate That Album. I'm Paul Muad'Dib, and with me, as always, is Joe Fremming of the Joe Down. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Paul.
You sound super happy, Joe.
It's a new dawn of America, Paul.
And nothing will go back to ever being the same, Joe.
I'm still adjusting to not waking up and wondering what the president tweeted. So
I'm in the same boat. Like I've been that's been like my go-to for a long time. Is I'll wake up in the morning, I'll give myself a minute, and I'll be like, all right, time to go on the news. And I do that now, and I'm like, there's no crisis. Like there's nothing going on. Like I'm so used to it being rapid fire that like waiting till 4:00 to hear from the brief from the press secretary and it being a normal exchange was just weird to me. So I get it. I picked this album this week for Rate That Album. We did your album last week, Joe, and you'll be picking the next one for next week. But the album I picked was Auf Der Maur, who is done by an artist called Melissa Auf Der Maur. What did you, just initially, have you ever heard of this album or anything by her before, Joe?
This was new to me. I've known her stuff from when she was in Hole. That was pretty much it. Like I know she temporarily was in Smashing Pumpkins after they ousted DRC. But like I don't believe she recorded anything with that. So I kind of knew who she was, and I knew she released an album, but it was like it just didn't fall into my radar. So listening to it the past week is the first time I've actually ever heard the album.
Okay. And yeah, well, we'll get into your thoughts on that, right, in a little bit. I want to get into. I just wanted to know because I don't think a lot of people know this album or know her solo work or know anything really about her outside of Hole. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to say solo work, I mean, she only has this one album that I've seen, and there's a. Oh, sorry.
She has another one. She has the one that she put out in 2010.
Oh, really? I didn't see that, but
yep, that's
so,
okay.
Anyway, I just knew her from Hole. I had no idea what to expect when I started it. When I first threw it on, I'm just accustomed to like when people from like in bigger bands they do a solo project. It's usually like an acoustic, kind of boring album. James Iha. So I was surprised when I put it on. It was like pretty much like a rock album.
Mm-hmm.
That threw me through a loop.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about her. So Melissa Auf Der Maur began performing in 1993 after forming an indie rock Canadian band called Tinker. While she was a student at Concordia University. She was recruited as a bassist later for Hole, and I'll get into that. I'm going to back up a little bit there. So she's from Montreal, Quebec. She's a Quebecer.
Dirty Canadian.
Dirty Canadian. So she attended the Fine Arts Core Education School and then later went to Concordia University, where she majored in photography. And this is something I'll get into about her as well. She's not just a musician. She's a photographer. She's an actress. She's done a lot of things just artistically with her life. She and her husband, indie filmmaker Tony Stone, own the Basilica Hudson, an arts and performance center in Hudson, New York, and they live on the top of that. So like they just live and breathe art. And so she started this band, and while she was in Tinker, Smashing Pumpkins did like a small club performance in 1991, and she had become friends with Billy Corgan through a really strange event. Her roommate at the time heckled the band between songs. To quote her, she said, "My friend Bruce, who later became the drummer for Godspeed You Black Emperor, was there, and he whispered to me, 'God, this guy has an attitude. They're acting like they're playing an arena.' And he threw a bottle of beer at Billy and shouted, 'Drop the fucking attitude.'" Billy.
Let me just say, I wish that was a life-changing moment for Billy Corgan to drop the fucking attitude.
Right. So Billy dived off the stage, put his hands around Bruce's neck, and they started fighting. And she thought, "Great, you ruined the fucking show." So she went up to Billy Corgan afterwards and said, "I'd like to apologize on the behalf of Montreal. You guys are my new favorite band." And Corgan was really taken to her and was like, "Let's become pen pals. Like, let's write each other." And they didn't hear for months, so she just on a whim asked him if Tinker could open for the Smashing Pumpkins when they were in Montreal. And Corgan was like, "Yeah, absolutely." Now, to give you an idea, this is how small it was, and this is how early it was, 1991, 1993. There was only 2,500 people at a Smashing Pumpkins show. And it.
To be fair, they still had 93. Had they even released Siamese Dream?
I don't think so. I don't think that even released.
So they're just still kind of up and coming at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like just Gish, I think, would probably be the one album they had.
So I think you're absolutely right. But, she's like 2,500 people. We've never opened for 25 people. And afterwards, he came up to her and said, "You're a really good bass player. You're going to be in my band one day." And so they did a few things with Tinker, in 1994, and then they disbanded because Billy called her and said, "I'm coming to town on 1994's Lollapalooza next week. But the great news is you're going to join my friend Courtney's band." And that's when it all started. Within a week, she had called all her friends. She said no. She said no at first. I can't do that. And all of her friends were like, "Are you nuts?" Even her dad said, "What do you mean? The Big Pumpkin guy offered you a real job in music and you said no?" Well, by that time, Courtney had gotten her phone number from Billy and said, "What he called her and said, 'What do you mean you don't want to join my band? You're getting on a plane to Seattle tomorrow.'" And she did. And Patty, who was in the band, picked her up at the airport. And she said, took her over there, and she said it was super awesome. It was good for me day one. It was they had all these lesbian nannies and assistants that were all around. She's like, it was a really cool, tight clan of mothering, caretaking lesbians that followed around Hole. Yeah, what happened was that the bassist Christian Plath died, and they needed a bassist, and through Billy introduced to them, and I guess she and Patty, the drummer, really hit it off like most bassists and drummers do.
Yeah,
and she was actually considered. Patty said that Auf Der Maur was the anchor during the period after both Kristen and Kurt's death.
That's kind of a shitty time to be joining a band. Because I think people have to remember, Hole and Courtney Love at this time were pretty much spiraling out of control. With heroin addiction and all that. Cobain dying, their band member died. Yeah, she kind of stepped into a minefield here, didn't she?
In a way, yeah. I mean, because, there was a lot of chaos going on. But being where she was and not wanting, I think, to miss out on it, she stepped into it. And like they said, she was basically the anchor during all of this. She was featured on various Hole releases, from 1994 to 1999 when they disbanded. And what happened was in June of 2009, Hole Love claimed that they were going to reform and Auf Der Maur was going to come back. And Auf Der Maur was like, I'm not coming back. Like, I can't, because I'm with the Smashing Pumpkins. Because this woman's had just an amazing career, because DRC left on that time that where they're on the hiatus, and she only signed a 5-year contract with Hole. And I'm going to imagine that 5 years of chaos. She doesn't say it explicitly, but you have kind of hit on it. I felt the same thing, that being in that 5 year of death and chaos was probably not the most conductive for what she wanted. So when her contract came up, she's like, I'm cool, I'm done, I'm not coming back. And so she started performing with the Smashing Pumpkins for the Machina, the Machines of God album. And, she was going to leave for this solo project. She told Courtney, I'm going to work on my solo project. But then coincidentally, that week, she got a call from Billy and said, it's time for you to join my band. And she said, I had to do it. So, but what happened was that they already had basically D'Arcy's bass riffs done. She's not actually featured on the album, but she did the tour. And she said that she couldn't do it anymore with Smashing Pumpkins. That it was, that it was so much more intense. The work ethic of Billy Corgan and the Pumpkins is so full on and demanding. She said it was just more work than about the emotional experience of it. That it was just go, 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 do it the way Billy wants it done, this way, this way, this way. And we know that of him. So she went on with a couple other with some former Hole drummer to start basically Chelsea and the Hand of Doom, a couple other bands that she kind of went on. So then she's like, okay, finally, I'm gonna go about and do my own album. When she was doing this, she went back and found songs that she had written for Tinker 10 years ago that never got recorded, and was like, oh my gosh. So she had all these, like, really this album is like a 10-year collection of her work. And who's on this album is insane too. Like, did you pay attention to some of the credits of people who are on this album?
Well, I looked it up, but I did. Mark Lanegan has such a distinct vocal.
Mm-hmm.
I spotted him right away. But I ended up looking up and seeing that. Yeah, there's a lot of good talent on this album.
It's like
Josh Homme.
Yeah, this is like the super group that no one knew happened, because you had Eric Erlandson from Hole on it. You had James Ira of the Smashing Pumpkins on it. Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age. Mark Lanegan of Screaming Trees and Uncle. Jordy White, also known as Twiggy Ramirez of Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails, is on it. Chad Gross of the Queens of the Stone Age is on it. I mean, there is just talent pouring off this album. That's essentially, what is all going on with it. And again, as I talked about just a little bit more about her, she went on to do work on her second album. Rufus Wainwright is like a close friend of hers, has been for years, I guess. So he joined her on her second album. She wanted him on her first album, on this album, but just they couldn't make it work. So she's gone on. She starred in a couple of the movies. She acted in a movie called How to Make the Cruelest Month in 1998. She was in Beyond Borders in 2003, and most recently was The Collaborator in 2011. She made a project for her 2010 Out of Minds album. She made an album, a single, a film, and a comic book out of it.
Holy shit.
Right. Like, she just oozes art. So with that, Joe, let's talk about, I've gone on, I need some water. Let's talk about what your thoughts are of this album.
All right. I just kind of want to have a little caveat here. Like, she stepped into those two big bands at like the worst moments. And I kind of feel bad about that in a sense, like, especially the whole one, but like replacing D'Arcy, like, people have to remember where the Smashing Pumpkins were at that time. Like, it was like Corgan was firing everybody like after Melancholy. So like, it's just interesting. But so we get to this album. There's a lot I really like about this album, and there's some things that I don't like.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the highlights. Let's start with the highlights. Like, what did you like off this album?
Okay, that's easy. I wrote this down. Taste You, I really liked. I thought that was fantastic. I'll Be Anything You Want, I liked. She even has a little reference to Black Sabbath's Paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
In the last track, I need, I want, I will. I really liked. I thought that was really interesting, and it also has the bonus track after we keep listening, where she sings "Taste You" in French.
Yes, which is actually I almost like that version better, right?
Yeah,
like that secret. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, so those are like tracks that popped out to me. I was writing it down as I was listening to them, and so yeah, there's like I love the instrumentation and the production of this album. It's like so intricate. There's a lot of layers of things going on that I really like. I when I was listening to it, I was like, man, this feels like this kind of has like this could fit in with like Josh Holm project. Then I looked up, I was like, well, holy shit.
So Taste You, both versions I had as a highlight. What If I Could for me was a highlight, and I Want, I Need were highlights. Which is interesting. I had
What If I Could on my highlight list too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, like these are some amazingly great songs. And I just wanted to I had a list of which, I got to pull up my notes here a second, of what the singles were. The singles were Follow the Waves, Taste You, and Real a Lie. And that's another one I really I think I enjoyed as well was Real a Lie. I thought that was
Follow the Waves. I didn't really. That was one of the tracks I actually didn't like.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Real Lie I had as my notes too. Well, let's get into the lowlights. Like, what didn't you like, Joe?
So this album for me, like again, there's like these songs I really love.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to have an identity crisis throughout, and I say that because for an album that's released in 2004, this sounds like it was made in 1996. It has a very 90s vibe and production and sound to it, which it was off-putting to me in a sense. Like it felt like this was like almost like a lost whole album at times. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like at times it felt like Celebrity Skin Part 2. Like these were like things like she would probably was going to contribute, and it didn't pan out or whatever. So like a lot of it kind of felt like that to me.
It's funny you say that because that was kind of the criticism of it. I'll talk about that here since you brought that up. Someone said, that it was summarized the album as the perfect CD for 1995 released too late. Is really the way that they described this. And so my lowlights of it, there's a song which is odd, which was Overpower Thee. I thought that was just a worthless song. And what's really interesting is that had Chris Gross and Josh Holm on it. And it had a very Uncle feel. Not Queens of the Stone Age feel, but they're working Uncle. The other thing I didn't like about this, and I wrote down, was weird, questionable chord changes.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the 90s thing. The chord progressions, like, very reminiscent of, like, Cobain on Nevermind. Kind of that draining, droning kind of thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, like, it reminded me of when I listened to, it was, like, in 2016, the Pixies released an album, and I was like, man, this sounds like the greatest tribute to or biggest Pixies knockoff band, because it felt like they were self-parodying themselves. I had that vibe with this, where I was just like, this is like, it was, I like a lot of the 90s music, but it just felt weird here for me. I think maybe knowing when it came out, if you would have said, no, Joe, this came out in 95, 96, like, okay, that at least makes some sense.
Yes, the fact that this is 2004. The other thing I didn't like about it was again, there's things even beyond the Kurt Cobain thing. I mean, there were some, I have some unreleased music and things of that nature. And I've been in several bands, and I still record here and there. I've been working on a 2-hour-long concept album for fucking 15 years. what I mean also by the questionable chord changes is that there were parts where like you expected the guitar or the beat or the to go a certain way, and it went to like this almost like a half or like a quarter, or like the wrong fifth. It was just like, oh, that's kind of that. There's there's a thing called dissonance in music, which can work out really, really well. There's a lot of artists that do dissonance very, very well, which is the act of using chords that play off each other oddly, but then it kind of builds up and makes it work. Radiohead is a prime example of how they can go completely off, and when it hits it, and it's glory, like it makes the climax or like the harmony that much more intense. Pink Floyd did it, I believe, on Echoes.
Yep. Cobain did that a lot with Nirvana songs too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The combination of like chords that make it feel just slightly askew.
Yes. And I also didn't like the bassy commercial hard rock sound. Like if you listen to the ones that I think we both liked, it was the ones that weren't bass. Like I understand she's a bassist, and I'm not saying like it was like she's playing bass. It was like the mixing of the equalizing was off. Like you weren't letting enough of the trebles through. And when you look at the songs that we really enjoyed, Real Alive, Taste You, What If I Could, I Want, I Need, they don't have that heavy overdose of bass on it. I don't know if you caught that or not, or have that feelings of
no, I did too. And a lot of things like too with me, like a lot of these songs kind of bled into each other.
Mm-hmm.
It was another thing. I think I don't know if it was like her confidence in her vocals and some of the hooks, but it felt like she buried her vocals a lot in a sense, which works sometimes. Bob Mould is infamous for burying his vocals into a mix. So like I felt like there's times where like maybe a chorus should have popped a little bit more, but it doesn't. It just kind of like bleeds into the verses a bit for me. So that was kind of like, if only she tweaked it here a bit, that song would have been a lot better. At least that's what I picked up from it. The bass too, like the heavy bass, like you were saying, like really reminiscent of like some of the late 90s kind of like butt rock stuff that was kind of coming out.
Yeah, but it still had that grunge tinge to it. It was like if someone took grunge, but then they gave it to a master of 80s butt rock or 90s butt rock to equalize the sound levels on it, or to work on the highs, the mids, and the lows, right? Like this definitely had that 2004 bassy kind of commercial hard rock sound for songs that were more grungy, that should have had that a full 1995 feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so the tracks overall are we'll go through them, and I don't know if you wrote everything about them. There was some that I was mad about, but let's just go through the track listing here for the audience. Lightning Is My Girl, first song,
which I actually liked. Minus like this kind of had some of that bassiness to it that I kind of was off-putting, but once it got into the actual song, I really enjoyed it.
Completely agree with you. I think it was a strong opener. Then followed The Waves. Now this surprises me that this was considered the first single. This doesn't have a single quality to me. I don't know about you.
Yep. Well, again, this kind of goes back to like how the songs kind of bleed. There's moments where it's just like there's no hook.
Mm-hmm.
There's no chorus. That works a lot. I'm not like one of those guys like every song needs a big poppy chorus or whatever. I mean, I'm just not. I listen to enough Lou Reed to justify that stance.
Sure.
But it just when it's like when you do it songs back to back to back, it gets kind of boring, and that's Follow the Waves was a boring song to me.
So, and I'll bring this up because I remember there was a time when we early on in our career performing, We ended up having to open at this one show for 2 bands from Minneapolis, up in our hometown, because obviously the Minneapolis bands, oh my gosh, they're the Minneapolis bands. And we ended up opening for them. And when we got off stage, both bands kind of came up to us and like, why didn't you guys like close it out? Like, why did you guys open? And we're like, because that's what we told we were to do. And they're like, you guys are better than us. Like, this is going to suck. And we're like, no, we're not. Like, come on. We're small town, whatever. It was just 3 guys with acoustic guitars doing a mix of covers and whatever. And these guys came in with like drums and one of the things was the second band was first song, I was like, God, this band's really great. Second song, okay, sounds a lot like the first song. All right. Third song, oh Christ.
Yeah. Only 2 bands can really get away with that. That's the Ramones and AC/DC.
Exactly. I'm sorry, but every Ramones song was Shauna was a punk rocker. You'll have that. Yeah, I didn't really like that one. Then you had Real Ally with Steve Duran, which was actually a unrecorded or unfinished demo for their band Tinker, which I think was like, I don't know what it is about artists, but tell me if I'm wrong, but there's something about that third track on most albums that's like, track 3 is going to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has to be, because if your first 2 tracks are duds, if you don't have it by the 3rd track, you're fucked. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody's going to listen past track 3. It's in journalism, we have what we call the inverted pyramid, where people only read the first 3 graphs of a news story. So you kind of like, that's might be like how musicians record, or like at least track their albums. Like, if you don't have the people sold by track 3, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do think that, and I also think it has something to do with the flow. Like you come in and then track 3 is like your first peak, as it were, and then you kind of go down and then, you get in. I think that's maybe also what's there. I can't describe it. So then you had Head Unbound, which I thought was kind of a blah filler song.
Yeah, it did nothing for me.
Me neither. And then Taste You, obviously, I thought that was a great song.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite song on the album. That is my favorite song on the album.
I would agree with you. I would completely agree with you. And then you had Beast of Honor, which again to me was another one of those songs.
Yeah.
I Want to Be, I'll Be Anything You Want had potential to me, but again, it was shorter and it had Josh Homme on it, which was nice. But it still was plagued with that bass sound to me.
I did like the bass line. It was kind of jazzier.
Yes.
That's what kind of stood out for me. That's why I wrote it down. Because for me, like when an album kind of differentiates like that, it stands out to me. Like, yes. I'd probably lean towards the oddball tracks more than a lot of the main ones. Yeah. I like Wild Honey Pie on the White Album.
Right. Yeah, I know. I get it. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally like that song too.
People think we're nuts, Paul.
Dude, I used to do Bungalow Bill for karaoke, so not exactly a popular choice.
Who'd you have doing the Yoko vocals?
I did it. I just made a funny voice with my a funny sound with my voice. Then you had My Foggy Nation, which again just was more the same of that, like Follow the Waves and Head Unbound to me. What If I Could, like that one. I thought that was a decent track, a little bit different than the rest that was kind of coming through. And I really enjoyed that. Then Overpower Thee was like this oddly placed, like going back to like the Beastie Boys album that we did, Paul's Boutique. It makes sense for some tracks or some songs that have like this weird thing that's kind of all of its own before you jam back in. But this is placed like 2 songs prior to the end of the album.
Yeah, you might want to bury this one more in the middle.
Yeah, that was my take on it. Skin Receiver did nothing for me. And then I Will. Now, I want to talk about this because you brought up the hidden track. I miss hidden tracks on albums, dude. Like, this is so cool that in 2004 there's a hidden track. Like, nobody does these much anymore. And to have it be
it was awesome in the 90s when people were doing this.
Yes, I mean, I remember getting was it Crackers Kerosene? I think it was. We had like 99 tracks, and a whole bunch of them were blank. But somewhere in there was one of my favorite Cracker songs of all time, Euro Trash Girl, buried in on these secret songs.
9 Inch Nails' Broken EP had 99 tracks. The last two, 98, 99, were actual songs.
Yeah. So this was like a fun little thing that we would get in the 90s in albums, were like these secret songs. And then, you get her grandmother singing.
Yodeling.
Yep, yodeling. That's her grandmother.
I thought that was nice. That was cute. That stuff, I mean, it kind of like Pink Floyd wouldn't want to do that. That would kind of take away from the theme.
Yes.
But like, there was a band in the metal band called Typo Negative that would kind of do hidden tracks where they thank people for buying the CDs, which was always kind of a nice whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's kind of a nice thing. And then you have the French version, a longer version of Taste You, which is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, like you said, you said you like it better. I do too. I think it's this version of it's more interesting to me, and I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't speak French.
Yes, I'm with you on it. I don't speak French, but still, it was engrossing, and I really enjoyed. Like, it flows so well in French. Like, it works. I don't understand how that works. I don't understand. I'm not a linguist.
It's like when you listen to the German version of those Beatles songs. Like, I don't understand how it worked either, but it did.
Yes. So let's talk real quick. I want to kind of go break down some other people that were on this. So you had obviously Melissa on it, Brant Bjork, who is known for kind of a stoner rock group, kind of was on drums. Obviously, her friend and who was on Tinker with her, Steve Durand. We already talked about Eric Erlandson, who is the guitarist for Hole. Again, Chris Gross, Josh Homme, James Ura, but Mark Lanigan. Yep. But who also was on it is Anna. I'm going to butcher this last name. Anna and Paz Lechantin, who
isn't that nicotine gum that the guy from Goodfellas peddles?
No, that's Chulies. Anyways, no, that's Clerks. They did strings for. Well, Anna did strings for Train, The Eels, Gnarls Barkley, No Doubt, A Perfect Circle, 9 Inch Nails, and Paz did strings for the Pixies and Zwan. So then you had Nick Olaretti,
Queens of the Stone Age. He's a Josh Homme guy.
Yep, absolutely. Josh Stanier, who was in Tomahawk.
With Mike Patton, right?
With Mike Patton, yeah. Helped out on this album. And he was also Mark Kane. We already talked about Twiggy Ramirez. Adam Willard, who kind of helped out. He's been he's done several artists with like The Crypt, and just trying to think of some bands that maybe you would know. Offspring, helped out with the Offspring. Did drums. Like, she brought in a lot of different drummers, like a lot of different drummer friends on this. So yeah, that's like the talent that was on this album. And it's kind of a who's who. And to me, I kind of describe this album as the super group that wasn't.
Yeah, it almost feels like Josh Homme does those desert sessions, and it feels like a lot of overlap between those and this.
hmm But when this album came to my attention and I looked into it, I was like, this is not what I picked. This is not what I expect to do as my first album on this show.
I was not expecting this either. Like again, I thought this was going to be like some boring acoustic album. That just seems to be like the curse of anybody who's been in a big band. Like I'm going to do my own thing, and it's just like, oh dear God, here's some Starbucks music.
No, I wouldn't do that to you. I just meant this album came to me very recently and out of nowhere, and so there's other things I wanted to do for an album. I had another recent album that came out that I expected to do as my first one, but this was just one of those things where I'm like, I know you've never heard this, and I know most people who are listening never heard this, and this is something that I do think I think it needs to be heard. I mean, you really want to talk about like some of the greats in music, in rock music, they were on this. People that were in, again, we talked about this, Pixies, Nine Inch Nails, Queen of the Stone Age, Smashing Pumpkins, Marilyn Manson. This is like a perennials who of the '90s, of the grunge '90s, and even getting into that rock of the '90s.
It kind of bridges the rock of the '90s with the rock of the 2000s, especially with the Queens of the Stone Age. Like I know they were around in the '90s, but they really didn't really hit their stride until Songs for the Deaf, which I'm pretty sure is like 2001.
Yes. Yep. I think that's 2001. Let me just make sure that one, because I want to be accurate in what we do.
Not me. I just want to make shit up.
For you. Good for you. Are you the Trump of our?
You, Paul, are the fake news.
I'm the fake news. Yes, Songs for the Deaf was their mainstream, and that was 2001 when they got Dave Grohl to help out with drumming. Yep.
That's a fantastic album.
It is a fantastic album. It is absolutely an amazing album. And again, one of the people we talked about was Paz, who was on this album, did the Mosquito song, which is the final track on that album. And they even brought in Dean Wiener, the Diener from Ween, to do guitar on that album, which I'm sorry, I love Ween, and people, yes, they may come off as a joke, but my God, they're talented musicians.
Oh, I love the Ween, and is it Diener or Jeaner who does the Moist Boys?
I believe that's the Jeaner that does the Moist.
That's if you never heard the Moist Boys, check them out because that is some interesting metal.
Yeah, I believe that's Gene. We're
like encyclopedias of not bullshit, aren't we?
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure. No, I think no. It's showing it's a Dean, a Moist Boys. Yep. Yeah, that's Dean. That's the Diener.
Diener.
Yep, that's the D. I call him Diener because of the song what Diener was talking about. So yeah, overall, I think this is an album that should be explored and looked at and understand what you're getting into. That this is like, I think, what commercial rock radio would have loved grunge to have been.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like it. I'll suggest people giving it a listen. I think I have to give it more time to grow on me. I've been listening to it the past week while I'm working, while I've been, just sitting around listening to music on headphones and stuff. And this is a good headphones album, by the way. There's a lot kind of like
great headphones album, right?
There's a lot of like stuff that if you're not listening to headphones, you're gonna miss a lot of music choices. So, yeah, I would say I would suggest it, but with a caveat that it does have that really awkward '90s thing that kind of gets distracting. At least it distracted me with like the tracks we're talking about where nothing's really popping. I'm just kind of it's like, oh, let's just This could have been a little more interesting if they leaned away from that a bit.
Yeah, this is one of those things where the highs I think are high and the lows are low, and it kind of creates this middling.
Yeah. Well, I
Of an
wouldn't say the lows are super low. I think the lows are just blah.
yeah.
Like it's just like paint drying. Like there can be lows on an album where you're just like, God damn, this sucks.
Well,
I did not get to that point with these tracks.
no, but we talked about that on Cast That Movie though. One of the worst things you can do with any type of movie is be boring, is be average.
That's the caveat of the Joe Down as well. Like our worst experiences watching a movie is if it's boring.
Yeah, and
the worst of that was when we watched SLC Punk 2, which is like 80 minutes,
God.
And it felt like it was 80 minutes too long.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a boring album, but what I'm trying to say is that the lows are low because they're average songs. Like it's, I think if there had been some like true low points in it, it would have made some of these other ones stand out more. Like throw in a bad song, like throw in a song that just is terrible.
Yeah. And maybe lean into because she has a good voice.
Yes, she does.
So I was kind of like, again, I kind of brought up like there's parts where I'm like, well, if she would have just laid into the hook a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And made her vocals more pronounced and make it that part bigger and then kind of minimalize the weird instrumentation to make it pop, but she just didn't for some reason.
Right.
That's fine. That's her call. But my opinion would have been like, I would have probably leaned in more at certain, especially on the more boring tracks where, maybe you'd want to do that just to keep people's attention going.
And I didn't write this down, but it's something I want to bring up. I'm glad you said that because this also said something about an expectation that I had, which was she's a bassist. I expected some some like crazy bass solos and bass-centric songs, and you don't get that here off of her album.
Yeah, which was weird.
Weird, right?
Yeah, that was strange because and it's not like she's a bad bass player. In fact, she's a really excellent bass player.
She's an excellent bass player. She's an excellent bass player. But yeah, I expected some bass solos or, at least her showing off her, being, somewhat owning her bass to it. And
bring out your inner Les Claypool. Just go for it.
Right. Like when you hear an album by a bassist, you expect there to be some kind of Les Claypool, at least something where the bass is being shown off in at least one song. Like I can check out this crazy bass riff that I came up with over the years. Yeah. And she didn't show off like that. And that's something I think was sorely missed on this album because, I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I've played bass. I've played lots of different instruments. But so when I hear like an artist that's like a guitarist, he puts out a guitar album, like Lindsey Buckingham, I know what I'm getting. I'm going to get a lot of Lindsey Buckingham showing off on his guitar. Les Claypool, you're going to see a lot of Les showing off. Dave Grohl puts out like a solo album. There's going to be some crazy fucking drum solos. So I was expecting at least some level of that here, and it's nowhere to be found, like not at all.
Yeah. That's an interesting, and kind of odd. Maybe, I guess she just wasn't interested in doing that. Because there's moments where there is like a weird jazzy bass lines, and then again it ended up kind of getting buried in the mix. If I was mixing, like, well, maybe we should make this a little more pronounced. But here we are. It's her album, not ours, Paul.
No, and you know what? I'm glad. I mean, in a way, again, this is it's a cool album, just for the fact, again, you look at all the talent that was on this, like all the people, all the different things, like she is the Kevin Bacon of music, and you didn't know she was the Kevin Bacon of music. I mean, she is within several degrees of Queen of the Stone Age, Arctic Monkeys, Foo Fighters, Iggy Pop, Screaming Trees, Marilyn Manson, the Gutter Twins, Uncle, Tomahawk, Mike Patton,
the Bacon Brothers,
Ween, White Flag. I mean, come on, Perfect Circle, Scott Weiland and the Wildabouts. This is some crazy talent that's all over this. So that's where I kind of wanted to go. So I think we really nailed this album. Both of it with a recommendation, but with the caveat of there's some great stuff here, but there's a lot of average. Yep. Right?
But the great stuff, I just want to press, is really good. It's really great. Like, it's really great. Taste You. I mean, that's going on a mix. Like, and I thank you for introducing me to this album, because like that's a song that I'm gonna throw on mixes now.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's on mine. It's been on mine since I heard it. That's what's at. So Joe, let's talk about what's going on at the Joe Down.
So this week we released a review of Maximum Overdrive. I did reference in the review to, if you want more of the history, to check the Cast That Movie episode, because the history of the making of that movie would fill a blog in itself. But we had fun with Stephen King's cocaine-fueled romp into cinema.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that, because normally what happens is, oddly enough, is that Cast That Movie, we end up doing something that you've done, and this is, I think, the first project that you guys did after us.
Yep.
There's Coke needs. I think it was Joe Brown that said that Coke needed its own SAG card. and he's absolutely right. And I love in the Joe Down the numerous references to Rick James. Cocaine's a hell of a drug. It cannot be stressed enough about how much blow was going on in Stephen King's head in this movie. Again, he came out and said that he was so coked up during the movie, he didn't remember filming it. That's how fucked up he was.
But it's one of those movies that's so bad it's good. I just love. There's like these weird asides, like, you know, like if you're not listening on headphones, you're gonna miss Emilio Estevez calling Camp Loman a happy asshole.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And Camp Loman saying, "You want to rock and roll with me, puss bag," to one of the trucks.
Yeah, So Scott despised this movie, and I personally, this is one of my guilty pleasures of a movie. Like, if it's on, I'm gonna watch it. There's some great moments in that, and you really nailed it. Like, this is the first, really, the Tommy was so. We made you. We made you.
You tear me apart, Lisa.
Oh, it's so bad. So yeah. All right.
But yeah, so that, and then next week we'll be doing Birdman. I've never seen it, so I'm interested to see how that goes.
Perfect. I have not seen Birdman yet. Everyone tells me they've seen it. I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list. I'm so far behind. That's awesome.
So we got what's going on with you, Paul? What's happening? Because I know there's some projects on hiatus, some having some changes. Whatever. What's going on? Keep the people informed, Paul.
Yeah. So
shotgun Mike.
All right. Yeah. No, I have some breaking news here for this. Cast That Movie with Scott is going to come to an end. There's just a lot of things going on. He can no longer commit to doing it. And he made it very clear that he didn't want to make any reservations of it, him coming back at any time soon. So I am in the process of changing that format with 2 new co-hosts. So it will come back in some iteration. I am making sure that Waterworld is going to be the first one that we do, because we promised Waterworld. It's that's where my head's at with that one, and just letting everyone know that that's not going to happen. That also means that Bears, Beats, and Bobbleheads, which Scott has said he will come back and do and wants to do when he has time. Will come back as some iteration, but that luckily we stopped where we were, and that's the end of season 1, so we can kind of come back whenever and say, okay, this is when season 2 is going to start for the show. So there's that. You guys will start seeing, I know I keep saying I'm going to do it. I got about 6 or 7 podcasts I need to edit, and it's just been piling up on me. So I am just going to bear down tonight and start working on some of it and getting through tomorrow and getting some of it. So there should be a whole slew of things that come out with this. The other thing I got to figure out is I'm thinking about, we'll talk about that off air because something we need to do for the podcasting for this one. The other one that's going to premiere is going to be that Tour of Hawkins, a podcast about Stranger Things. We already have 2 recorded episodes with our new co-host on that one, Griffiny. Some big news there, and unfortunately losing Scott is difficult for me. For some of you that are probably regulars of what I do and have been following and friends of ours, Scott has been what I've considered my heterosexual life partner in all things artistic. All but one of my bands I was in with him. We wrote a movie together, filmed it. It's still in post-production for years because of the sound issues, but eventually will come out at some point. There's a lot of things that we've done. So it's kind of difficult for me to take a project that we work together and continue in the exact same format. So I am going to switch it around so it is a little bit different. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad he'll still be with Bears Beats Bobbleheads because I like Scott a lot. I don't know him that well,
yes,
but I have a blast with that. So knowing that's still in the mix, I'm happy for. I'm sad that he's no longer with Cast That Movie. So you have big shoes to fill, Paul. I mean, let's hope it's a Melissa Auf Der Maur replacing Scott and not like some chucklehead that'll make me stop listening. No pressure, Paul. No pressure.
Well, the nice thing will be is that there will be no Ted Mills.
I ruined him.
You ruined Ted Mills, and Ted Mills will not be coming back. Yeah, it's going to be. We're still working on kind of. I will say that I think it's going to be, not. It's going to be a sidestep. It's going to be a. I don't want to say it'll be funnier because I don't know if it will be funnier. But the people that I'm getting involved with it are both very hilarious people. So I think having 3 people in on it, and doing these types of things and talking about these movies, like I'll throw it out there, guys. So one of the things we're thinking about really doing is still keeping the director and actors in there and talking about what went wrong with the movie, but adding the things that we really hated up in the movie. Like one thing that Cast That Movie was really missing was kind of a breakdown of what goes on in the movie. We kind of explain the history and expect you to know what goes on in that movie. And I think that's something that's been missing. So I think we're going to be adding kind of this format of the 3 of us ripping apart the plot of the movie and kind of what goes on within the movie a little bit before getting to our recasting. Not treading on the Joe down like what you guys do, like boom, boom, boom. But like, hey, there was this particular part of the movie that was just fucking ridiculous, right? Or, hey, there was this part of the movie where it came out of left field. Like, why did that happen? Things like that.
Sweet.
So there is that. Big news, sad news, but I think it's going to propel the thing, and I think it's going to get us to a wider audience with the addition of these 2 people. So sorry. It's just, I kind of knew this was coming, audience. I was just waiting for the formalization of it. Wah. I know, downer note, Joe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, man. You just spring this on me right now.
I know I'm a cocksucker. I get it.
God damn. We're having a good time and you just...
you know what? The next Joe down after Birdman could be you and Joe beating me up. How's that?
Jesus Christ. All right. So since we got that out of the way, I'm going to announce next week's album.
Yes, I'm curious. What's next week's album? What's next week's album?
This is going to be the last modern one I do for a while. I kind of want to go back in time to other albums from the past. This one is, came out in the mid 2000s.
Okay.
It's by a group called I have no idea if you even know who this is. It's a group called Neon Neon.
Ooh, I don't know this band.
The album's called Stainless Style. It's a concept album about John DeLorean. And it one track features Harmar Superstar.
Interesting.
So let me pull this up real quick. Neon Neon is like a side project. It's Boom Bip, who is a DJ producer, and Gruff Rice from Super Furry Animals. And it's a 80s inspired concept album about John DeLorean.
I want to hear this. I want to hear this because I watched the John DeLorean where was it who played John DeLorean? There was a documentary or like about him. And they had someone, I thought, playing him. There was a recent documentary, maybe I'm getting my documentaries mixed up, about the DeLorean and the crazy shit he was doing. So yeah, I want to hear it. So this is called, it's called Neon Neon. I'm going to pull it up here on my YouTube music. Hang on.
And the album's called Stainless Style.
All right, let me look at this here because I'm going to bookmark this here. So it's Neon Neon. Stainless Style, and it's on my thing. So what I have is the bonus version. Is that the 17
That
track?
is just fine.
So yep. We'll do the bonus version. Okay.
Yep. And then after this, I'm probably gonna get to a little less white dude music.
Okay.
That's one thing I was kind of concerned about, just because that's a lot of what I listen to. So we'll be changing it up a bit with the albums after this. I really wanted you to listen to this album.
Yeah, I want to hear this one, and I have one that I want you. Well, yes, I'm going to save for what my album's going to be. But yes, I will get listening on this right away. I'll listen to this all week and give you my thing. So yeah, Harmar Superstars on there, Hot Chip, Fat Lip, Your Majesty, Spank. Okay, this is gonna be interesting. Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing about the backstory of this band because this is not a band I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it was kind of sprung on me in like 2006, and like I was just like, how that, yeah. I'll get into that next week.
Interesting. Yes, I'm super excited about that. Okay, well, I think that's really it, Joe, unless you have anything else to add.
Nope, we are good. So until next time, Paul.
Ride the lightning. Shit, no, follow the lightning. Fuck.